So, Pierre Plamondon, of course, head of the PQ, in the news this week. There is finally a PQ document suggesting what it might be like on day one, year one, of an independent Quebec and what the budget might look like, what financial sort of situation we might find ourselves in. Now, before even delving into that, there was already, and we talked about this on air yesterday with Andre Pratt, he's one of the people who took a deeper look at this budget and said, you know what? There are things in here that don't seem to make sense. So we wanted to have a chance to talk to Paul St. Pierre Plamondon, who's on the line right now, and try to understand exactly, first of all, what's going on and why the reaction to this and what he thinks of it. Mr. St. Pierre Plamondon, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Let me begin by, first of all, might as well get this out of the way. I mentioned we talked to Andre Pratt. The first thing he dealt with, and I'll let you listen to the clip, concerns itself with your estimate of what you think the federal budget is going to look, what your budget rather is going to look like with respect to federal payments. Here's what he said.
Well, I think the major issue is the issue of what share of the federal debt would an independent Quebec have to take on its shoulders. In their document, they use a methodology which is very favorable to a separate Quebec, which the rest of Canada would never accept. If you use another more realistic method of calculating this share of the federal debt, you come up with a number that is $50 billion more than what the PQ says. The PQ says, we have our method of calculating. It's the best method for us. It would serve Quebec well, and we take for granted that Canada would accept this method. But obviously, Canada won't do that.
Okay. Is he wrong in that assessment?
Yes, he's wrong, but most importantly, he's very partisan. So Andre Pratt is a well-known federalist, and he has the right to have his opinions. And now I think what we're dealing with here is we've done our work a year ago based on a methodology that has been a consensus and that has been accepted since the 90s, when that methodology was created in the Bélanger-Campeau Commission that was nonpartisan. Of course, if Andre Pratt wants to oppose independence of Quebec by creating a whole new methodology, then the possibilities are unlimited. If he wants to create a methodology through which we will be $200 billion more indebted than the document of the PQ, he can create that.
Okay, I want to stop you, though, for one thing. You said there's a partisan tie here because Andre Pratt, of course, is a well-established liberal. He's one of the people who came out with the paper. Two of the other economists are not linked to any party that we're aware of. So how do you account for that?
They are. So one is clearly liberal, and the other one did work for Jean Charest and as a sous-ministre as well in the federal... So there are links, but just to come back on methodology, it's not about the people here. It's about the nature of the work. They've done a 25-page document in which they throw all sorts of arguments that are based on the methodology they just created. And most importantly, what the PQ has done a year ago is not to make decisions about specific budgetary decision we can make or not in an independent country. We follow the methodology through which we are bound to make the same choices than what Quebec in Canada and what the federal government are actually doing right now. So it's a very restrictive methodology where you can't make any arbitration, you can't make any choice. You just want to look at the level of debt if you make the same choices than under the Canada. And the interesting part is that those four persons that are clearly linked to a certain level to the Liberal Party, they agree that an independent Quebec would be viable financially. So the question here is not about whether Quebec would be afloat, would work as a country. Everybody agrees. All 125 elected members of a National Assembly also have voted in favor of a motion saying that. It's really about making the work of the Parti Quebecois less credible by throwing arguments that are not based on any methodology. Okay. But of course, if they create new methodology that has not been studied nor discussed, they can make figures say many things.
Yeah, I get it. I understand it. We're not going to have a ton of time, so let me move on to a couple of other issues. One of the issues brought up in this analysis had to do with 60,000 federal workers who are now here working for the federal government. What happens to them in an independent Quebec?
So exactly as I said a year ago, we'll have answers about that. What we published a year ago, we forced us to make the exact same assumptions, the exact same financial decisions than under Canada. I was already clear that we couldn't keep all federal public servants because we pretend that there will be economies with the end of making everything twice through ministries in Quebec and in Ottawa that actually do the same thing. So, for instance, Revenu Canada, some public servants will not continue their work in Quebec because the whole goal is not to make everything twice. And we will be specific about that. We will publish later those estimates, those calculations. What we published a year ago was just about looking at whether an independent Quebec is financially sustainable, viable, and everybody agrees it is the case. And there will be other documents. So when André Pratt, in his document, he says that we're hiding how many public servants would lose their job, anybody who followed what we've done and what we've said around what we published a year ago know that we were very transparent about the fact that we will have those answers.
Yeah.
But what we published in terms of budget was just an evaluation of the financial viability of
So
Quebec.
you have a plan. You're not able to reveal the plan. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that a government formed by the Parti Quebecois will have more resource to evaluate every single program and every single job, every single dollar, because we will get $82 billion that we're currently sending to Ottawa. We will be specific about each dollar in terms of where we will spend it.
There's an argument about how much. There's an argument about how much of that money you picked the number $82 billion, for example. Although there's not necessarily a consensus on that being an actual real number that you would get back. Is there not?
It's pretty much a consensus, and so the figures is easy to calculate because that's what we are actually sending to Ottawa through our taxes. I have to say that our work was verified by 6 different economists that represent almost all universities in Quebec, and many they have ideological differences with Parti Québécois. They don't agree with the Parti Québécois on everything, but they indeed recognize that we followed by the book a methodology that exists for more than 30 years. So the figures are quite reliable, but once again, there will be another step where we'll be very, very specific on the figures. Okay. A year ago, we were more in a theoretical framework to see whether this can float or not. And it's been the same answer for every time we've done the exercise. Quebec would become one of the richest countries in the world and would have a fairly positive or advantageous situation in terms of debt in comparison to the size of our economy.
Yeah, that sounds a little, I'm just, to me, to hear you say Quebec would become one of the richest countries in the world, that sounds a bit crazy given the fact that we haven't even been nailed down the specifics, the details, as you just said, of how everything would work. But to Mr. Pratt's point, if I could ask you, this idea that Canada would willingly decide to go ahead and give you whatever it is you're asking for, and I think he brought that up in the clip that I played, that seems a little far-fetched as well.
Yeah. So for Quebec being rich or not, we have figures such as GDP, and we have figures about the debt. For the question of whether Canada would be in good faith or in bad faith, we followed international law. So there is a convention that deals with those asset and debt split, and it's been done before, and the name of the convention is the Vienna Convention. So we followed international law and established principles in the international history of creating countries. So the argument of André Pratt is to say, well, this is the law or the international principles applying, but Canada could be very mean and very much in bad faith. And that's a fear, an argument of fear, but I cannot verify or I cannot say much about that argument because it's a fiction, but clearly that fiction is created to induce fear. And in the history of the 2 referendums in 80 and 95, the no campaign was a lot about fear, a lot about discouraging a democracy from deciding.
Well, with all due respect, it's a lot of the fear of the unknown, isn't it?
Yeah, but then you create a universe where the unknown is really specific, like the Brinks trucks leaving Montreal with tons of money because there are separatists.
Right. Yeah.
in power are telling elderly people that they will have no pension because things have been said and done in the past that were really about creating fear and that were lies. And it's impossible for me not to see similarities between the document of Mr. Pratt and techniques that have been used in the past, but that have been used as well in Scotland and in similar situations. So all I can say is our work has been verified by 6 economists. Everybody agrees that an independent Quebec would be viable. And as for the specifics, I think it's very legitimate to ask questions about the exactly will be budgeted here and there.
Okay.
But we will do that work if we're given the mandate, if we have the means to do it, and that's under a government of the Parti Québécois, and we'll be very transparent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we once, back when Pauline Marois was, of course, running things for the PQ and talked about an independent Quebec, suggesting, you know what, from day one, it's going to be a little tough, but over the number of years, things will get better. Is that not your outlook anymore? You think from day one, we're in the driver's seat?
I really respect and appreciate Pauline Marois, and she might be correct. I don't see it that way because the studies we've looked at is that if you only take the countries that were created democratically, so if you subtract all countries that were created through war or civil war or unrest, normal countries being created, such as Slovakia, they saw a spark in their GDP in the following months. They didn't have that rocky period. And the reason for that is that once you start existing worldwide and there's a certain trend, you'll have embassies establishing themselves, you'll have commercial missions. So studies show that if it's done democratically and peacefully, you will have, in the short term, a spark in the GDP. But then I can't guarantee that. But no, my general perspective is that I expect rather a small kick from an economic standpoint. And of course, it's true that there's a period of negotiations that can take many years on certain aspects. So there are things we don't control. But what we can say with certainty is the data we have from other countries or other similar situations that happened.
Okay. Mr. Plamondon, we got to wrap it up there. I thank you for your time. I think the word you want to use is spike, right, as opposed to spark?
Spike,
you see a
sorry.
spike in it. That's okay.
It was really spike I was
That's okay.
trying to use.
We're going to talk. Don't be sorry. We're going to talk again about this. I thank you for the time. I always appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.